some of you since you've completed the survey before. However, the ACGME did do a complete overhaul of the survey back in 2020. And so there's a number of things that are quite different. So even if it's a repeat, it's good to just focus on some of those differences and how they matter. So we'll go over some terms on the survey. We'll look at the content, and then we'll end with some tips. I always like to say that I'm not here to coerce you or to tell you what to say. I aim for this session to be educational and informational. And so when it comes to the survey, this is only completed by residents and fellows. It is true that faculty also have their own survey, but it's separate and it's different. The items are different as well. And the only reason I know that is because the reports that we receive are quite different. We do expect, just like the ACGME, that 100% response is submitted by each program. And the reason why is that, one, it guarantees that the program will receive its report. But the other thing is that it is like you're talking directly to the ACGME. And so if anyone's unwilling, well, then the question is always, why, on both ends, from the program, institution, and then, of course, even the ACGME. And it is confidential. Our office nor the program, they will never see the actual survey. We get reports that are kind of digests of what was submitted, and you will complete some general items that every resident will complete. And then usually in most core programs like yours, there will be additional items that are asked about the specialty. And sometimes, depending on the review committee, it is targeted at senior residents, like asking you about if you feel competent to enter autonomous practice and things like that. And your program will actually open the survey for you so that you can complete it. And it is one of the sources of information that is used by the ACGME to review your program. Every program receives an annual review, and what they do is determine your program's compliance with ACGME requirements. And so looking at the reports from these surveys, they often do interpret anything negative, or depending on the threshold, as that the program is not meeting requirements. And we realize that the survey is perceptions, but like I said previously, it is really like you're talking to an ACGME staff member when you take the survey. And, so we just want you to keep that in mind. I know everybody has survey fatigue, and you get asked to do a lot of these things, when you do have lots of other things going on, but it really is, that important in terms of reviewing the program. And so the first, I'm not here to say that these are the only terms that are confusing on the survey, but these are the ones I know about because questions have come up in the past, but there may be other things. And so sometimes the degree of confusion depends on how these apply to your program or not. And so, if you're a program that completes or takes in-house call, that if you see items on there, those are only referring to shifts that approach or exceed 24 hours. And what can be confusing is I think this does apply to your program, but if it didn't, sometimes it's hard to know how to answer an item like that, because there is no not applicable in any of the choice responses as far as what we've been told by ACGME staff. You may also have questions about night float, and that would be a rotation that is designed or an educational experience that's designed to occur at night and usually to eliminate in-house call. The term cross coverage is coverage of patients that a team member would provide for another resident on their patient care team if someone's not present. And ACGME uses the term assignment to refer to rotations. So when it comes to handling something that you feel is not applicable, if you answer like the program is in deficit or doesn't have it, or that's going to count against the program. So what I encourage you to do in those circumstances, if you think something doesn't apply, is to stop taking the survey, because you can stop during the survey. It will save your responses to that point, and talk to a more senior resident, just for some insight, because again, you can't put not applicable, and every response counts when it comes to evaluating the program. And so we'll take a look at each of the content areas. The first area is probably one of the most important areas. It's the clinical experience and work hours section, or duty hours. And in this section, there's a number of items that are based around ACGME duty hour rules. And what they're trying to get at is your program fundamentally set up for you to violate duty hours? It doesn't mean that your program never has any problems with duty hours. I think your program has, and I think Dr. Basha and others have been really working quite hard to eliminate that, eliminate everything that they know about and correct it. But, so as far as scheduling, are you actually scheduled for more than 24 hours, of clinical assignments? So, because you can have a 24-hour schedule with a 4-hour post-call wrap-up, and that would be for notes, no new admissions, so that you can leave. Does your program abide by the 80-hour duty hour rule? Do you have 1 day off in 7 when averaged over 4 weeks? And then do you take in-house call more than every third night, also when averaged over 4 weeks? So I think sometimes the ACGME survey does not include all of the language of the rule, so it might be partial. So sometimes I think the previous survey asked about, do you take in-house call more than every third night? But the full rule is that could happen, but when you average it over 4 weeks, is it still that pace? You'll also be asked if you have 14 hours free after 24 hours of work, if you feel pressured to work beyond the 80 hours, or pressured to work additional time. And I would say is just, let your program know, let us know if you think your program is breaking the work rules. We're trying to work very hard, and I know this is sometimes probably annoying from the GME office, but we do contact the programs and you guys about logging your duty hours on a weekly basis. So that we have accurate information. And, we also will come in and talk to you guys if there's some logging issues or violations to help eliminate those. And then I think the program has done a lot of work in this area. And anything that is less than 100% compliance, meaning a non-favorable negative response or a neutral response, can result in a citation for the program, just because ACGME takes it so seriously. So that's why I go over it first. I won't do this after every section, but because it's so important, do you guys have any current issues with duty hours? Are you heading in the right direction with, correcting any violations, or structural, changes to the program to make sure that you're abiding by the duty hour rules? Okay. So please, work with your program coordinators and Dr. Basha, if there is a concern. Um, And we'll go on to the next section. That is faculty teaching. This is a relatively short section that only focuses on a few elements of your education. You'll be asked if your faculty provide an appropriate level of supervision for you, and if there's an appropriate amount of quality teaching. And I'm going to come back to that in a minute. You'll also be asked if your faculty members are interested in educating you, and if they provide an effective environment of inquiry. Meaning, is the focus more on your education and your learning, rather than other activities that you're involved in? And I know that's sometimes hard to see. So it's important to have conversations about that, because you'll do many activities that are aimed at educating you, but, does the focus always come back to that versus, the things that you're doing? The reason I wanted to come back to the faculty, these items on faculty providing appropriate levels of supervision, is these items that on this side right here tend to be scaled differently from some of the other items. And this is what an ACGME site visitor told me. So that these items are set up where they're scaled differently, like I said, but I don't know the order, but instead of being like the 1 through 5, with maybe number 1 and number 2 being obviously negative, the neutral middle ground for number 3, 4 and 5 being positive and very positive, these items will ask and give you anchors that are do you have an appropriate level of supervision? And 1 and 2 might be not at all, none at all. Number 3 might be the right amount. And then 4 and 5 might be a lot, and 5 might be too much. And so, and if you're considering that item just now, it might be difficult to figure out what is the quote unquote compliant answer. And so the compliant answer is really the middle ground in that one. It's the right amount, because that would mean that the residents and faculty agree that they're getting the appropriate amount of, faculty teaching or supervision in that case. So just be careful. I can see how saying a lot might seem better, because it's the emphasis of it all. But then it might be, well, are they getting so much that they're not able to do other activities that are key to the specialty? So it's kind of tricky, uh, to navigate that, especially if you're going through it quickly. In the evaluation section, again, you'll see the term assignments instead of rotations. You'll be asked if you have opportunities to evaluate your faculty members in the program. You'll also be asked if you can access your evaluations and if you're satisfied with feedback. So a few things to keep in mind in this section is, we know you can typically evaluate faculty members. That's a required evaluation that our office makes sure that your program sets up. Our GME office actually sets up the program evaluation. We release it around November-ish. I think we're going to try and start in October to space things out, in the future. And then we, send you reminders to complete that. And that is so that we can provide those reports to the program to get ahead of this survey. So if there are issues that maybe didn't come up in any other way in the program, that they can look at that information, your comments, and act accordingly. And with respect to accessing your evaluations, so once they're completed, do you go in and look at those, or do you wait for your semi-annual review? So it's not asking you if you do access your evaluations, it's asking you if you have the ability. And that's also something that, that is routinely, set up for you. Whether you use it is a different question. And then looking at the satisfaction with faculty feedback, this is just, this may be again, like how much feedback, do you receive, like the right amount, not enough, none at all, a lot, or too much. Just consider that, the compliant answer is really like the right amount. And then this isn't getting at whether you liked, the feedback, whether you agreed, with the feedback. I'm not sure that would be a separate item. In the educational content section, you'll be asked about if there are scholarly activity opportunities in the program. These are if they were present, not that you actually participated in them, realizing that not everybody has that goal. And so like this would be access to work with faculty to publish, but present at conferences, write your own articles, quality improvement projects, and so forth. And you'll also be asked if you have had education in healthcare disparities and education on assessing patient goals. Just in January, our office had us Dr. Noda Mopara from Internal Medicine Pediatrics come and give a Zoom session on healthcare disparities. She will actually come back for in May for us to give part 2 of that. And we do record these. These are all uploaded on unlisted YouTube channels, and we link those playlists on the home page of New Innovations. And we do encourage programs to use those videos to supplement what you're already doing, or to have additional important conversations in that area. You'll also be asked in this section about if you have instruction on maintaining physical and emotional well-being, your instruction on sleep deprivation, and when to seek care regarding fatigue management, depression, burnout, and substance abuse. This is something I personally recall that your program does do very well and cares very much about that. With respect to other resources that may, get not focused on as much. So there may be things that part of your annual orientation, or as new residents, come in, talking with them, but that they do it for the new folks, but include everybody else at the same time. As we also have the well-being index linked, in New Innovations. You can take that 9-item survey to assess your depression, burnout, fatigue management problems anytime. You can take it as many times as you want. And when you do, there are resources that are linked to your results that you can immediately access. In addition, there are wellness resource posters that kind of cover some of your benefit information, and you can receive like, mental health counseling over the phone, online. There are also some local resources that may have sliding scale, options for you. Um, in addition, our office is trying to support, scholarly activity. We did have the IRB from Wayne State come and give a presentation alongside our DMC clinical research office. We did record that presentation that is also linked on our playlist. In the diversity and inclusion section of the survey, this was a long-standing requirement at ACGME, so I think they added it to the survey to get your, perspective. It can be a little bit tricky to answer if you're not involved in certain aspects of recruitment. You may not know, so this would just be an important area to talk about, like how residents are selected. And so you'll be asked if you are prepared or you feel prepared to interact with diverse individuals, and whether the program itself fosters an inclusive work environment and promotes diverse recruitment and retention. Most programs use the AAMC's holistic review to consider the whole applicant in interviewing. And then now that a lot of other exams are changing and going to pass fail, that is also supporting that effort, because figuring out the right fit must be done by other means. If there's one thing I hear is that, residents really are proud of the DMC in terms of our diverse patient population, the training sites that you can go to, and the trainees themselves. Um, and as part of our own series, we're having like a monthly faculty resident development on like microaggressions, implicit bias, and systematic racism. And those are held kind of the middle of the month, also all recorded and linked on our website. February was microaggressions, and there is one coming up, next week. So if you can't make the live day, which does have CME attached, you can always go back to the recordings as well. And I know Wayne State is also having a number of sessions, so lots of opportunity. In the resource section, this is a fairly long section of the survey that asks about a number of things. You'll be asked about your perception of non-physician obligations and then interference of other learners. Usually other learners, the presence of them is a help, just in terms of the schedule alone, but then also like it's opportunity to teach if they're medical students, but also an opportunity to learn from them if they're from institutions. So, but they're, getting like, is it competition over cooperation? And we'll also be asked if you have sufficient time to provide direct patient care, and if there's an appropriate balance between your education and patient care. In addition, you'll be asked about your ability to attend personal appointments and access to mental health counseling or treatment. So every program has a policy, and that is kind of nested under the institution's policy of how, like, time off or time away from residency, can be used. It's not asking you if you do take time to do these things. I know I myself am horrible about maybe like attending to some of the advice from my own physicians, but so it's more like, can you, if you needed to do so and wanted to do so, are you able to engage in that and take advantage of it? Again, like I think a lot of physicians, you guys are entered something that's very self-sacrificing and very much always focusing on other people, but it's always important to focus on yourself as well. With respect to accessing mental health counseling or treatment, I have posted the employee assistance program line here. You can have it in your phone. If you call this number, there's actually more benefits than just the mental health counseling, but you do get 5 free telehealth visits. You can also go online and chat with someone as well, and it is accessible 24 hours a day. In addition, you can get in-person referrals. You can also, if you have other questions, but you don't really know where to start, like let's say you have a legal question, you can call this number and there will be some degree of legal advice or at least direction of where to go. Same thing for financial concerns and other things just related to your personal life. So it is a benefit that's already included, and while you're training here, so I do encourage you to take advantage of that. At our like office level, we're always, trying to work with programs to make sure that they're meeting requirements. And usually, like in this section, we want to make sure that they're protecting didactics, and if there's things that they need for the residency, that we do that. We also work with hospital leadership to address, other needs to kind of keep, perceptions of service over education, at a minimum. But that is something we always encourage programs to talk about, because there are a lot of activities that you will participate in, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's service. And sometimes things have to be done, frequently to, build that skill. So we always just encourage you to, respectfully and tactfully, bring it up. If you're not seeing the educational value of something else that's built into the program, because our office does hear complaints, here and there. But then when we talked with programs, in many cases, there's a different perspective that the faculty will have on that. In the patient safety and teamwork section of the survey, you'll be asked if your interprofessional teams, so could be fellows, nurses, pharmacists, case managers, and social workers, are they focused and emphasizing patient safety? Is that the ultimate goal? Realizing that on a day-to-day basis, there may be issues, that pop up, or conflicts, that pop up. But it is the overall focus on emphasizing patient safety. And our interprofessional teamwork skills modeled or taught. Is the goal to focus on what's important, rather than personal agendas, or other things. And then you'll also be asked if you know how to report patient safety events and how to properly transition care. And with respect to reporting patient safety events, our goal is to get MIDAS feedback, to programs, but because of the way it's set up, that is proving, fairly difficult. But they are addressed. That reporting system is monitored and is reviewed. We do know that with respect to adverse events analysis, there is usually resident participation in M&Ms, but usually outside of that, programs also look at, in particular cases, to look at near misses, and adverse events associated with that patient's care, just for, the goal of well, what happened? How can this be prevented in the future? And how can we sustain improvement once it's made? At our office, we also have the Center for Quality Improvement, where 2 years in a row we have been providing quality improvement education. We are also members with SEMCME, the Southeast Center for Medical Education, and they also provide additional education and opportunities to present quality improvement projects. Our office does that as well. We're gearing up for Quest in April. In the professionalism section of the survey, you'll be asked if your faculty act professionally when they are providing care or when they are teaching you. And so two separate questions, or two separate topics in that regard. You'll also be asked if you kind of have a tiered approach to your concerns. So do you feel comfortable asking questions? Okay. And then you'll see some separate items on do you feel comfortable raising a concern? And can you do so without feeling intimidated? And then the last would be if you can raise concerns, what's your expectation that those concerns will be addressed? And that's kind of tricky, I will say, because residency programs change every year. You have a group of residents graduating, leaving the program, and then you have a new group coming on. And, so it's just putting that out there for perspective taking, that, programs, what would work for one program is going to be slightly different on a rotating basis. And so sometimes programs do change things, in response to what residents liked. It's okay for a moment, and then the group changes, and suddenly that decision is not as good as it used to be, because of the change in group dynamics. So I ask you to consider, was your concern addressed, not whether you liked the solution. And then with respect to reporting, you always have, our office. You can report confidentially through new innovations on the homepage. If you, in the top left, if you click complete an evaluation, select the one with GME in the title. It will take you to a 2-item form where you can submit your concerns, and our office checks that form daily to look for additional submissions. You can also work with our resident council, and of course, come see us. All right, so now this next section is more education about how the survey is laid out. And so you see in the middle here, this is a sample report that I'll get to in a moment. But as I mentioned previously, that the results are reviewed as part of your program's annual review. And there's only like 7 to 9 documents at any given time that are used to determine your program's status. And the reason it fluctuates is because sometimes, like if there's a site visit, there would be a site visit report, then that brings up your total to 8. And if there's like additional information, so it does vary, from year to year, like citations. If your program doesn't have any citations, then that can't be considered, and so forth. So what their ACGME review committee is looking at is your compliance percents. And what I mean by that is the percent of residents who gave a favorable response, who in like each item, answered compliantly. So in my little sample report here, this for education compromised by non-physician obligations, this would be 29% gave a non-compliant response and 71% gave a compliant one. They do look at means, but I would say that more emphasis seems to come from the compliance, overall. But again, if it's a favorable response, the mean will be, fairly high in most cases, depending on how the item is scaled. Uh, Also, like patterns over time, trends over time are also issues. Anything that has less than 85% compliance is considered a flag. And I know that means it's very sensitive, but that's also why we talk about like how important the survey is, because they have a very, very low tolerance of non-compliant answers. And in the duty hours section, they have zero compliance, I'm sorry, zero tolerance, for anything that's non-compliant. So our best advice to programs is to talk about what's happened since July, 2020 until now, to respond to previous, survey results and to work to improve the program. Because I assure you, I know day to day, sometimes it's hard to see change, it's hard to see improvements, but that is something that's constantly, on Dr. Bosch's mind. I know it's always on our mind, in our office, and we're always working toward that. It's just that other additional things, pop up that have to go on the agenda and be addressed as well, in addition to following all the other regulatory requirements. And so as a result of the survey, the program status can change, their accreditation status can change. They can get kind of formal areas for improvement, meaning we noticed this trend and the program should address it, and they should do so in major changes. And then citations are formal written responses that are required from the program to provide measurable information of how the program has addressed the concern. And requests for information can happen. In addition, site visits. And they will say, specifically that they, based on a review of the resident survey for that academic year, that there are some concerns in X, Y, and Z, and, they're coming to collect more information. With respect to reporting problems and concerns, we've gone over this a little bit, so I won't belabor what we already have, but every program has its own internal structure of how things should go. So, just make sure that you're abiding by that protocol. So sometimes it's, go to your more senior residents first, and then maybe a committee, or maybe directly to the program director. At the institution level, ours is, we have an open door policy. You come see us, or you can contact us, and we will meet with you. We will respect the level of confidentiality that you desire. This is the DMC resident site. You can submit concerns to them. They meet every second Thursday of the month. So not this week, but should be next week is their March meeting. And you can get something directly on their agenda, or you can talk to the executive board. And then I talked about our anonymous concern form, about Midas. And then the ethics action hotline is here. You can call this number. If you do, it will not be recorded. Your name will not be requested. And you will get a number for what you've submitted that you can use to follow up on that concern. And this is for ethical and professionalism concerns that it's more appropriate for. And our take home message from this is that the results on the survey really shouldn't be a surprise. So anything that shows up on the survey, really, it's the way to really get it fixed is to alert the program, because you'll take the survey, now, but then the program might get the results in May. And then that's like, if you're a senior, there's a very little time to see change, with respect to that. But if it's communicated earlier, the program can act. And so this slide talks a little bit about how the survey is laid out. And so you'll see that in most cases, it's a 5-item, Likert scale with 2 negative poles and 2 positive poles, and then a neutral middle ground. When you see this, you need to just know that neutral, the somewhat, sometimes, these are considered non-compliant responses and count against the program. There is no hiding on the ACGME survey. So you can't pick the middle ground and think like, well, I don't want to commit to either side. And what does it matter? I'll just pick this. Or however you arrive at that decision. It needs to really reflect what you think. So we just recommend that you pause and consider where you really feel and answer accordingly. The other thing to know about these Likert scales is it's tried and true practice in survey writing to flip the scale throughout the survey so that you know that people are paying attention when they take it. And it's irritating, I think, to some because we've had complaints about that. But it's their survey; they're allowed to do that, and it just means to be careful and go slow, and slowly throughout the survey to kind of attend to how each one is scaled. And then, as I mentioned previously, there may be times where the scale is organized in such a way where the middle ground is the compliant response. And so overall, we just want you to make sure that you understand what you're completing. I would say the most common feedback we receive is that there is, confusing information on it, that the items are long and like it's hard to understand like what's the actual like what's the favorable answer, because even figuring that out, much less how it applies, might be challenging. And we do like you to remember that in some cases, like if there's a neutral middle ground, that it's going to count automatically against the program, and to please, use your other, resources to report your concerns, because we're, sending them to ACGME is way too late. We also want you to take your time and pause the survey, go ask a more senior resident, or think about, what it actually is, talk it through with someone. We do tend to know that the average time spent on this survey is only 3 minutes. And even I was just at the conference last week, and even though the surveys changed, this total time has not gone up, so that there's that just happy clicking, throughout, the survey. And when it matters that much about your program's future, we just, ask you to dial that back a bit and spend more time. In addition, I always give a little bit about bias awareness. The survey responses should reflect your, perceptions and what you're willing to speak to, not like how you think someone else wants you to answer. And also try to avoid determining your survey responses by comparing your program to another. That's not the only way to figure out, what's going on in your program. And the only fair comparison is to include everybody in that comparison, but we're usually not mentally able to do that, so we tend to have more convenient, comparisons, and it can be favorable or unfavorable for your program, but it's still kind of a faulty exercise to engage in. And so your responses should reflect, what's gone on in your program from July 2020 until now, those perceptions. And so, we do encourage, like, that way if conversations do happen at the program level about what's gone on, that can help you like, oh yeah, because we get so busy in our day to day that sometimes it's hard to focus on that progress to date. We also just encourage you, like if something negative happened, that may also skew your perceptions. Same thing if something very positive, happened, that can also like just, influence your response choices. All right, so the survey itself is open, but your program will release it to you, and then they will also send you your reminders. If you complete it sooner rather than later, the fewer reminders you will get. Usually, if up until the window closes, which is April 1st, the program will try, will continue to send those reminders to make sure that everybody completes it. And then I've posted a link in here that is to the ACGME documentation for the survey. You're free to have this with you. It's published by the ACGME, and it has like the frequently asked questions. It has the constructs for each section. So it just may remind you, of like, how to navigate it a little bit better, but anything that will help you process the survey more slowly and more accurately is definitely something that we want to promote. So that ends it for me. I will, if you have any questions, I can address those.